This is Paul Schneiderman today on the 100th edition of Sports Untold. It's my podcast, also played on Rainier Avenue Radio, and my special guest today for the fourth time is UW Husky football legend and former NFL player, current Husky Honk broadcaster and a YMCA director, Greg Lewis. Well, Greg, I appreciate you coming back for the fourth time on Sports Untold, formerly Sports and Stuff on Rainier Avenue Radio. Appreciate you coming on my podcast again.
My pleasure. Anytime I get a chance to talk about sports is, a little fun for me, so I enjoy it. So no need to thank me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, Greg, you're a gentleman. I appreciate it. It's always fun to chat. You know, I like to ask you light questions and a few tough questions here and there. So you got that smile. You're like, all right, bring it on, Paul. Right?
Bring on the tough stuff.
I see that smile. Right. Greg, tell me about this new Husky Honks deal you have going on KJR AM 950. You and Dick Baird and Dave Softy Mahler are like the panel talking Husky football. How's it going with those guys? And do you find Softy and Dick Baird a little too light at times?
Well, I've been doing a Husky radio broadcast for the last, 7 or 8 years. And before that, I did television with Bruce King. So I enjoy talking Husky athletics and Husky sports, obviously. And with KJR getting the new full-time radio bid to broadcast Husky football, it was kind of natural for me to go over there and join up. And with Hugh Millen stepping aside because his sons are actively involved in playing college football, it opened up a spot on the Husky Honks. And who better than Greg Lewis to bring on, I think I bring some interesting perspectives. Not only was I a former Husky football player, but I was also assistant athletic director in the department for 7 years. So I sort of have that, student athlete, their best interest lens that I bring in. I've coached, sports for many, many years, and I'm a huge Husky fan. So I think I fit kind of right in with the guys, and it's been fun getting a, new crew. Dick Baird has certainly been associated with Husky football for a long time, and he's a true honk. He sees everything glass half full, and if there's something really wrong, he looks at the bright side and how can we fix it, which is a great perspective to have. And I think Softy is sometimes your typical fan. When things go bad, he, overreacts, and when things go great, he overreacts. And so it brings some levity and some energy to the broadcast. And I just try to, be honest, talk about things from a football perspective, from a student athlete perspective, and really, show my Husky fandom, but in a way that's true to what's actually happening and going on, and pointing some things out when they need to be pointed out. So I enjoy doing it.
Greg, it seems that things that you really landed with the Como Husky contract, when that ended, it seems like it worked out pretty well for you personally, being able to cover Husky football after the Como thing ended at KJR.
Yeah. I mean, I've been, like I said, doing something affiliated with Husky sports and media for a long time, a lot of years, and I enjoy doing it. So when the Como deal ended and KJR got the bid, the consistent part was IMG Sports, who owns the rights to Husky sports marketing.
That's right.
And since IMG was responsible for hiring the radio station, they liked the work that I did when I was with Como. And so they made a place for me to come over to KJR as well. So, Tony Castricone, who's the voice of the Huskies, really liked some of the work that I had done there. So he asked me to be a part of it. I was hoping to do some of the play-by-play, but they did get a really good guy in Cam Cleland, who's a former Husky as well, who's working with Tony on that part of it. But they did keep me involved. So, I'm thankful for that.
You got the pregame and postgame stuff going. Dick Barrett's a funny guy. My mom actually grew up with Dick Barrett. They went to Roosevelt High School together. So I've known Dick casually over the years. I know Softy a bit. And hey, by the way, for my few listeners and my few watchers, I did a continuing legal education presentation. That's why I'm still in a coat and tie. So Greg, and also I put a coat and tie on. I'll keep it on for you as well. So Greg, you are basically working as a correspondent reporter for Husky football right now. And what is your take? And you're not really out, at least at this point in your career, with the fans sitting in the stands. What do you think of the new policy at Husky Stadium selling alcohol at games to all fans over 21? And what do you think of the new policy that fans could not leave the game and re-enter the stadium. I have so many fun memories of leaving at halftime and running to like a friend's tailgate and running back at the start of the third quarter. Give me your thoughts on those two new Husky Stadium policies.
Well, I think the policies are in place because things have changed. Things are different. There was a time when Husky football was probably the most viewed and watched sport in our town. In the Mariners' infancy, the Seahawks were rising to prominence. Maybe the Sonics were capturing the basketball fans. But Husky football was a big, big deal. And there were 75,000 people in the stands. And there was this great game day environment and great game day experience that was generated just because the Huskies were so beloved. Well, Seattle's a progressive city. And now when you go to a Husky game, there are lower numbers at the game. There are a lot of things to do on a Saturday. And let's face it, the Huskies have gone through some ups and downs since probably 2000 when they went to the Rose Bowl with Marcus Tuiasosopo and sort of that last connection to the Don James, Jim Lambright era with players who were recruited by those guys. And so the athletic department has been tasked with trying to create a game day experience that fans will not only enjoy, but will keep fans in the stands, coming to the games, and enjoying that full experience. I went to the Michigan game this year. There were 108,000 people in the stands cheering loud. I mean, going crazy. And they've had some struggles recently up until this year. So I think those policies are trying to figure out how do we, one, create a great experience for everybody, and two, keep the fans in the stands. We have late arriving crowds a lot. We have people going out and never coming back. We have people going out so that they can get beer and that sort of stuff. So why not put that stuff in the stands and then keep people in the stands and not allowing them to go back in and out? Because the idea is to give the kids the best environment that they can to have the play in and give the fans just that game day experience that, the University of Washington, has had in the previous years.
Paul Schneiderman hosts the 100th edition of my Sports Untold podcast, also on Rainier Avenue Radio with Greg Lewis. Yeah, your points, I get your points, Greg, and I can understand why they're selling alcohol at the games now. That I don't have a big issue with. But maybe when the COVID thing improves, I like the idea of being able to leave the stadium and come back. But, hey, there's worse things in this world, so I don't want to,
Just so many people choose now not to come back. The tailgating experience has become a bigger deal than some people's experience than the actual game. And I think the idea is to, when that third quarter opens up, to not have the stadium half empty, to have folks still in their seats, in their stands, rooting for the Dogs and rooting for those kids and giving them that home field advantage that, I know we had during the era that I played.
Gotcha. All right. I see your points. I want to get your feedback. All right, Greg, I asked my prior guest this question. I try not to ask too many repeated and recycled questions, but sometimes you like to get multiple guest feedback to a question. All right, Huskies are now 2-3. They had a very brutal loss against Montana to start the season. I want you to put on the Greg Lewis crystal ball. When this season is over, will the UW loss against Montana be seen as an aberration, or will it be seen as a sign of a team, the University of Washington Huskies, had some very serious holes and problems?
Well, I think it's a sign of a team that has new coaches, young. I mean, we have 6 seniors on this team. We have 75, I think it is, players that are considered freshmen or redshirt freshmen or do-over freshmen, whatever you want to call that COVID year. And so it wasn't as much as people thought, we have everybody coming back and, we have this great offensive line. We had a lot of young players on this team. And I think going into that first game, we weren't necessarily as ready as we thought and as good as we thought. I think at the end of the year, what we'll see is hopefully a coach who's putting his system in place, learning kind of on the job. I have no doubt Jimmy Lake will be a good head coach, but I do think he's in that learning, process right now. And so there's going to be some setbacks like that. I think that I wouldn't necessarily call it an aberration. I'll call it that's where we were at that particular time. But hopefully at the end of the year, we'll be a better football team, and Jimmy Lake will have learned and be it on the job in front of fans who have high expectations. He's still learning on the job.
Greg, you mentioned Jimmy Lake, and you may have read the question when I asked here. So when the when the Huskies were 0-2,
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy Lake and offensive coordinator John Donovan were coming under a lot of scrutiny. There's still scrutiny
Sure.
going on. But what do you think of this criticism that Jimmy Lake and some of his staff have been receiving?
Well, I think criticism is fair because that's what fans do. They want their team to win. They want their team to be successful. They're emotionally charged, and in a lot of ways, some of that's good. You don't want apathetic fans who don't care. So I think criticism is going to come when you're not where you want to be, and I'm sure Jimmy Lake and his team and staff aren't where they would hope they would be at this time. But I think there's a reality that this is where you actually are. The bottom line is, though, is how do you continue to improve and get better? And, at a certain point, is what you're doing the right way and the right style, or if you want to call it that. And so if not, then what changes do you make? We all know that old saying, to do the same thing the same way and expect different results is insane. And so they have to figure out, is what we're doing ultimately and eventually going to work if we execute it properly? Or is this not the way for us to be successful? And if it's not, then we got to make some changes. Again, fans are going to criticize and critique, and I get that. I think that it's fair to say they're not doing as well as they should or could be. I think in the last game, I felt like the Oregon State game was theirs to win. And there were some probably 2 or 3 situations that happened, whether it was coaching or players executing, that ended up creating a loss there. So they definitely have to get better and do some things differently if they want to continue to make that progress to becoming a good team, which I think, again, ultimately they can be. But at the end of the year, Jimmy Lake may have to make some changes, and that'll be based on their observation on, is this the right way or not?
Greg, you were at that game in Corvallis?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you guys fly or drive there?
No, it was a drive down.
It was a drive down there. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But you guys have Husky broadcasting team and Husky players have flown to Oregon games before, though, haven't you guys?
Oh, yeah. I didn't go with the team. I actually just drove down with the broadcast team.
Okay.
But during my era, we used to take one bus trip a year.
Yeah.
And it was either Oregon State, or Washington State.
Okay.
Until my sophomore year, we went to Oregon State. We had some sort of malfunction on the bus. Actually, we drove to Oregon. We had some sort of malfunction on the bus. We had actually lost the game, and we had to drive back, and it took us about 8 hours to get back. And Don James said, I will never do a bus trip ever again. So from there on, we never took the bus again.
That's an interesting story. That Don James said no more of those bus rides.
Yeah.
Greg, you look at the Huskies with 2-3 start, but we are 1-1 in the Pac-12 right now.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see maybe the Huskies getting really lucky and maybe winning the Pac-12 North with like a 6-3 record? I guess I have a couple questions within this question. Is it going to take that many wins to win the Pac-12 North? That's part of my question here.
I mean, it's possible. I thought going into the last game, that was sort of my message. Hey, we're 1-0 in Pac-12 North. We have a chance to give Oregon State a loss in conference. Oregon's got a loss as well in conference. So it could have really put us in a good position, to get there. I think right now there's a lot of parity in our Pac-12, especially on the north side, with anybody having the potential to beat anybody. Oregon's got a loss to Stanford. Stanford's definitely vulnerable. Washington State beat Oregon State. We've owned Washington State, and we have a win against Cal. So who knows? I mean, I think right now we certainly can't lose another North game and not probably more than one other South game. So I think in order for us to win the Pac-12, one more loss at most, and that being probably from a team on the South, would be all we could tolerate.
It's going to be a challenge, but I have a little optimism that we're 1-1 in the Pac-12 right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's always hope. And I think if we can we have our toughest games at home. We got UCLA, Arizona State, and UCLA and Oregon at home. And I'm trying to remember, I think we played Arizona State. Yeah, we play Arizona State at home as well. So those are the three toughest games probably left on the schedule. And Washington State, of course, the Apple Cup, our rival. And we go to Arizona. So we have absolutely an opportunity to win the Pac-12 North, but we'll see what happens.
Greg, you mentioned Arizona. And as we speak today, there's two Pac-12 teams in the top 25, Oregon and ASU. There's three Pac-12 teams, including Arizona and Colorado and Cal, that are in the bottom 25. We've talked, Greg, in a couple of my interviews with you about the Pac-12 conference.
Right.
What's your take on having three of our 12 schools in the bottom 25?
The Pac-12 is in trouble. I mean, I don't say this, for shock value or for hyperbole. But if you look at recruiting and look at the top kids that are in the Pac-12 footprint, I mean, a huge swath of them are leaving and going to Ohio State, Oklahoma. Alabama's recruiting up here now. Clemson's recruiting up here. And not just in California, but they're coming to the state of Washington. There are three top players over the last two recruiting classes from the state of Washington, two of them being top 5 players that are now at Ohio State. And I think the Pac-12 is suffering from I'm not going to say credibility, but more an image issue that was exacerbated by the terrible television and bowl alliance and contracts negotiated by the last Pac-12 commissioner. I think that set us back. And now it's becoming more of a self-fulfilling prophecy because we got behind. We kind of fell out of the national picture race. Now kids who are highly recruited that saying, I want to play for a national championship, and I can't do that in the Pac-12, or leaving the footprint in even larger numbers. And now we really can't compete because we don't have those kids that are the top players. So I think there's, some issues going on with the Pac-12, and the new commissioner is going to have to figure out how over the next 3 to 5 years he turns that around. It's a big job that he has. I certainly think have a little more confidence in him than the last guy. And, I'm not mentioning names, so I'm just saying, the people in those roles. But I think the Pac-12 has some work to do in order to get back to being one of those top conferences. There is a lot of parity. I do think we're still very competitive. We saw Oregon go down and beat Ohio State, and then Oregon turns around and loses to Stanford. So there's still good football being played in this conference. I just think we have to figure out a way to get the best players to stay in the Pac-12 footprint that are on the West Coast.
Greg, you mentioned this new Pac-12 commissioner. When I had you on my show before, I know you were critical of his predecessor. Without saying the name, I can do it that way. But do you feel this guy was the right hire? This current, what is his Klevak? What's his name? George Klevak? I always mispronounce his last name.
Yeah, I can't pronounce. Yeah. I don't want to butcher it. So.
I may have just butchered. You think he was the right guy for this new for this job?
He's saying the right things at this point. A lot of the work can't happen right now that he's going to have to do because some of these contracts are still in the time in which we have to honor them for a few more years, whether it's television and bowl and those kinds of things. But the conversations around creating some alliances with other conferences to do some home and scheduling things that I think could be advantageous to make some really good competition and to keep some of the teams from leaving our conference. I think right now holding the Pac-12 together is a big job that he's going to have to, stay on top of. And then, once we get through these next 3 years of TV deals and all that, is there an expansion opportunity for our conference to look at from some of the other players? So I think right now, from what I know and what I've seen and heard, I think he knows what the task at hand is. And he seems to be able to get some things done based on the alliance he's already made with another Power 5 conference. So I'm looking forward to seeing what else he can do.
Greg, you mentioned Husky recruiting. Why do you think some of these top local kids, really gifted high school football players, are leaving their backyard school and going to Ohio State or whatever? Do you have there's
a lot of pieces to it. Like I said, one right now, if you look at the last 10 national champions, where do they come from? They don't come from the Pac-12. I mean, they just don't. And matter of fact, Oregon in the first year, and then us back in 2016, I think are the only Pac-12 teams who've even been in the playoff. So one, these kids want to play for a national championship, and they don't see that capability in the Pac-12. The other thing are some dynamics that have happened that are related to youth football. So there's like a AAU select type of football now. There's padded, and where kids are playing, kids from California playing against teams in Miami, full pad games. And then there's the 7-on-7 summer circuit. So kids who normally wouldn't have been seen, in the Midwest and back East now are being seen by recruiters and coaches at a young age, and they're getting to know these kids. Social media has allowed them to post their highlights and their clips and their skills online. So now everybody across the country can see them. Also,
that's a good point.
When they go and play in these 7-on-7s and play AAU football, they're meeting kids from Ohio and Nebraska and wherever. And then the best players, kind of have this, hey, let's get together and go play at Ohio State. Let's get together and go play at Clemson. They're meeting people, and they can communicate with these guys on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all of that. So the world has gotten really small. And so now it's easier for people to know about the talent over here back East, and it's easier for those kids to meet other kids who all want to go play somewhere together, those top kids for a national championship at a traditional power. So all those things have had an impact on it.
Your points about the effects of the internet and social media and all that on recruiting, very, very good points. Because, when you were being recruited in 1987, remember it well, it was just a different era,
Well, no one back East would have known about me, playing at Ingram High School in Seattle until maybe my senior year, if at all, because there were no Greg Lewis YouTube highlights of me, running all over Roosevelt.
Oh, come on. Don't go there. Don't go there. I got stuff for my alma mater.
Yeah.
You love to throw in the Roosevelt shots, Greg, with me. You have fun doing it. Yeah.
Plus, the top kids I knew were all from the Northwest, and we all talked about, let's go play together at UW or go play here. Where now, if I'm playing 7-on-7 in Alabama, I might meet some of the top kids from there, and they was like, hey, let's all get together. Let's keep in contact, and let's figure out where we want to go. Who's going to be the top school, and let's all go there. So all those things have a huge impact on recruiting now.
Yeah, kind of like different, but like Durant and Irving and are getting together. I guess that's right. I guess high school kids can try to do that at the college level now. Paul Schneiderman, host of the 100th edition of the Sports Untold podcast, also on Rainier Avenue Radio with Greg Lewis. All right, Greg, we're going to go back maybe to little Husky football if you don't mind, but I'm going to ask you about a very discussed subject the last 24 hours. What are your thoughts on Jon Gruden being let go or being ousted? And what are your thoughts of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking him out of their Hall of Fame?
Well, when I first heard about it, his comments, there was an understanding that those comments made like 8-10 years ago. Then later it came out that there were ongoing 8 years worth of comments. So I have a couple of things. One, Jon Gruden, it sounds like he might not be the person that he says he is. He said a lot of bad stuff. I mean, I've seen some of the things he said and some of the emails and all of that. And those are things that just aren't being tolerated in today's climate. I think that there's a heightened awareness around people making sure that they're not creating barriers for others. My opinions are mine, but when I go into an environment and I take those opinions and thoughts and ideals with me, it's going to affect that environment. I'm going to judge people and judge things based on the ideas that are in my head. So it's understandable that an organization where there's a lot of diversity, like the NFL, his thoughts and ideology might impact what that league is trying to do, and it might create barriers for certain people. And so you have to say, is this something that we can mitigate or not? And it doesn't seem like they were able to. What I also believe, though, is this. He stepped down. And I think the reason he stepped down, because I think there are worse emails. And they're like, if you don't step down, these worse emails this is just my own personal thought process, these worse emails. So that's that. I am, a little leery, though, of cancel culture, just like everybody else. And that's a term now.
Right.
Where you take something someone said maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and you say this is who this person is, and they can never change and they can never, grow and that sort of thing. So I think we have to be careful. And I think that's, where that line with him was. Had it been the statements he made maybe about D. Murray Smith 8 years ago, he might have been okay. But this ongoing 8 years worth of back and forth with another prominent NFL person where there was no holds bar, and they picked on everybody: the commissioner, the union rep, female referees, LGBTQ players. They went in on everybody, and it was quite obvious that there was no remorse around these comments that they were making. And once this stuff was discovered, he was just saying, well, that's not who I am. But there was never really any real remorse, I think, around what he said. The other thing I think is they found a lot of these things while they were investigating the Washington Redskins. What did they find out about them? When's that coming out?
You bring up a lot there, and I was actually on my friend Anthony Richmond's, our mutual friend's Facebook wall, another Roosevelt guy. I got to throw that in there, Greg. We'll have a little fun with this Roosevelt Ingram versus Ingram. But anyhow, there was some. It was interesting because sometimes the posts on Facebook are kind of you take them or leave them. But there were a bunch of people posting that said we've all said things we regret, and there was a little bit of theme that nobody's pure in what they say, and I thought that was kind of reflective when I saw a few of my friends and colleagues put that up. We've all said things we regret, but Gruden's situation, you brought up a lot of points there. Yeah. But, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, it just seemed like the whole longevity of all of the comments, it seemed like it was about an 8-year, all the way up until 2018, 19, till he came back in the league, that he was still sort of expressing some of these thoughts and ideas. And, sometimes you're going to have to pay some consequences for your actions. Now, it doesn't mean he can't be redeemed, and maybe this is an opportunity for him to examine himself and say, hey, I am flawed. Maybe he's not admitting he's flawed, but if he can say I am flawed and I want to become better and go through that process, think about somebody like a Michael Vick, who, he had, this history, and he paid his price, and he said, I'm flawed and I want to do better. And he aligned himself with PETA and other organizations and never had any other issues. So maybe Jon Gruden could do something similar.
You mentioned cancel culture, Greg, which can happen. It goes on in the right wing and the left. It goes on in different different ideologies. But the idea of taking a guy like Gruden out of the Buccaneers Hall of Fame, let me tell you why I have an issue with that. Mm-hmm. Are we going to start taking like Ty Cobb at the Baseball Hall of Fame? He's a terrible racist, Ty Cobb. There's some really not very quality people in a lot of these different types of Hall of Fames. I don't know. When I saw he was taken out of the Buccaneers Hall of Fame, I kind of thought that went too far. What's your thoughts on that?
I would agree there that that's too far. He was honored for what he meant to the Tampa Bay organization and bringing them a Super Bowl. I think, right now we're at a time in our history where it feels like in order to somewhat right wrongs, we're going the whole other direction. And I don't know if it's too far or not per se in every arena. I think in this particular arena where it's a football Hall of Fame and it's an NFL deal, I don't think anyone would come in there and really, at least I wouldn't, from that perspective, go, oh, what's he still doing in here? So, I guess in my one man's opinion, I think that might have gone a little too far.
I tend to agree. Hey, I got 2 questions from a listener, Dre Burshane, or I think we both know. Dre, he's a nice guy. Dre had one question on what schools would you like to add to the Pac-12, and he had a second question on, I think it was what current running back reminds you of yourself, reminds Greg Lewis of Greg Lewis. So there were 2 questions I think he had. So,
yeah, I'm not a big, fan of adding players, but I mean schools. If you'd ask me, let's get rid of Colorado and
you want to subtract, you want to contract that,
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's go back to the Pac-10 and get rid of anyway. I think you got to look at the teams that are still around in what used to be the Big 8 when I was around, and look and see who's still there. And out of those, I mean, and when you talk about adding team, there's the academic side to it too. The Pac-12 has always been only major research institutions. But from a football standpoint, BYU might be the best team in the Pac-10 right now. I mean, they're 3-0 against the Pac-10. They have 2 more Pac-10 games to go.
Well, I didn't thought of that. Yeah, I didn't thought of that. Yeah. BYU.
Texas Tech has, had some, good football, had some good runs. So, I guess you got to look at Texas schools, maybe BYU. Those are probably the primary schools.
How about San Diego State? Would that be an interesting one? San Diego State?
No, I'm not. Okay. I think San Diego State, Fresno State, schools like that just don't have the pedigree, I guess, and they're not traditionally from Power 5. I would like to add either a major, unaffiliated like a BYU or another Power 5 program.
So geographically, though, San Diego's a large metropolitan area on the Pacific Coast. There is that angle to it, but okay. And I think Dre wanted to also know what young running back today reminds reminds him of yourself. I guess.
Man, I don't know if he's asking about the Husky running backs as if he is. None of them. If you took them all and morphed them together, maybe. Because I think McGrew's too small. Pleasant doesn't have enough elusiveness. Oh gosh, why am I forgetting the Richard Newton? Just hasn't, he hadn't been able to stay healthy, and 2, I don't think he's been as explosive as maybe I was. So I don't think anyone that the Huskies have right now really
at the
is
moment.
In that mold.
Okay.
They're throughout the history of Husky football. I really loved some of the guys like Myles Gaskin. He was different than me, but I really, liked him, thought he was good. I was probably more like a bigger version of, oh gosh, why am I forgetting the kid out of Gonzaga Prep in Yakima? In Spokane. Sankey. I was more of a
Bishop
bigger
Sankey.
Bishop Sankey.
Bishop Sankey.
Yeah, I would say the bigger version of that guy.
Well, a factoid that I like to mention about your career, Greg, is I think you finished 7th in the Heisman Trophy vote in the 1990 season. Was it 6th or 7th? That's a cool little fact, So
yeah, I would preface that by saying I didn't play the last 2 games, so I would have had at least 300 more yards if I'd have played in those. And we would have beaten UCLA had I played, and we would have won the national championship. So I think if I had 300 more yards and we win the national championship, I might have finished in the top 3.
Greg, I think you're on to something. I had Dave Craig on my show, the famous quarterback, a few weeks ago, and Greg said, I didn't get to 40,000 yards in the Hall of Fame discussion. We didn't have those strike-shortened years. And, there's all sorts of stuff with athletes you can think of that didn't happen that could have changed the calculus.
That injury cost me quite a bit. So.
Yeah, I remember that. And I think you would have had a longer NFL career if you hadn't got hurt. But but you still had a good career when you played. Paul Schneiderman again, host of the 100th edition. I'm at the century mark of the Sports Untold podcast with Greg Lewis. All right, Greg, another big question I have for you, and this is a sensitive subject. I'm going to ask it. We hit on all sorts of stuff. When you and I talk,
I got an opinion on everything.
I know. Well, yeah. Well, we talk off the air. We chat too. Only I think 7 people in Washington State have gotten a COVID religious exemption, which Nick Rolovich is seeking. What do you think of his attempt to get a religious exemption now for refusing to take the COVID-19 vaccine?
That's his perfect right. Everybody can get an exemption based on what they believe, and I don't think anyone has any, right to criticize, critique. But it's also, the state of Washington's right to say we want all of our employees who are going to be around a certain, number and groups of people to be vaccinated, or they have to forfeit that right to work there. So it's his right to forfeit his job if that's what he wants to do. I'm not going to criticize him for doing that. We all make our own decisions, but just know that every decision you make has consequences. And if that decision has the consequences that he's going to lose his job, and that's the decision he, decides to make, then he decides to forfeit his job. That's on him. That's, his right to do that. Like I said, I don't think we have the right to criticize anyone for their decisions, but everybody needs to understand that if there are consequences, I'm not going to feel sorry for you for suffering the consequences. What you knew was going to be the consequence when you made your decision.
Rolovich is clearly on notice the possible consequences. You know, it's an issue too where a lot of it's how you frame things, and I tend to think that if we were framing these COVID requirements as more as requirements than mandates, it'd be seen different. Like you take like gun safety versus gun control. Sometimes it's how you frame things. And let's face it, Greg, you know this, there's requirements for all sorts of jobs.
Yeah, well, Paul, the reality is everybody's made this a political issue. I don't know how you turn a safety issue into a political issue, but it's so politicized. That's when it went from, vaccine recommendations or requirements to mandates, because we made it political. It became a left versus right. And as soon as things become political, people dig their heels in and they, dig their feet in the ground, and they're not going to be moved regardless of what the evidence or science or anything says, because we made it political. And that's the issue right now. Everything is so damn political that it's hard to, see things through that. For me, when I thought about the vaccination, it had nothing to do with my politics. My politics are all over the place. They're more middle than anything, but they lean this way and that way, depending on the subject. But it was a medical thing. It was a health issue. And so when I looked at it from a medical perspective, especially since I work in an environment that we're connected to doctors and scientists and all of that, I looked at it on what made sense to me. And this is what made sense. And so I made my decision based on that. And it was a medical issue. But, because it's a political issue, that's why you have things like, what we're seeing out here.
Well, it should be more of a public health issue than a political issue. Yeah. I'm sure you agree with that. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Greg, a little sense of humor here. And I got another question for you from the audience in a minute. You're going to crack up at this. So I went on a blind date many years ago, probably about 17, 18 years ago. And the woman told me she was looking for a Jon Gruden kind of guy. I will never forget that the rest of my life. So I was so humbled by that. But okay, if she wants a Jon Gruden guy, So,
yeah. Wow. Well, I wonder if she still feels that way.
I don't know. But I always got a kick out of that. And I thought about more the last 48 hours or so. So I thought you and a couple of the listeners are going to chuckle.
We're finding a little bit more out what a Jon Gruden kind of guy is.
Yeah, that's a way to look at it, too.
What's Jon Gruden?
Yeah. Jon Gruden is a former coach of the Las Vegas Raiders who just got pretty much, he resigned, but due to some controversial and ethnic-based and remarks about homosexuals and so forth he made years ago, he was let go. What was the question, Lucius? I have a question from a friend of mine, a Roosevelt guy, Dan Shikiar, who I grew up with. What is Dan's question?
Ask Greg if he remembers running me over in high school.
Dan Shikiar, who I grew up with, he played football at Roosevelt. He wants to know if you remember running him over in high school. So
I do, because I ran the whole Roosevelt team over my junior. Actually, I'll tell you a little story.
Dad was a year behind you. He was class of '88. You were '87. Okay, so yeah, okay.
Well, I made my first start ever as a running back my sophomore year against Roosevelt. Coming out of Little League football, I was always offensive lineman, and I played a little defensive back my freshman year. And my sophomore year, I was a backup tailback, and our starting tailback had got thrown out the game for fighting the week before we played Roosevelt. So he wasn't going to be able to play. And so they started me as a sophomore, and I actually made my debut and realized how good I was based on Roosevelt allowing me to run for a lot of yards and a couple of touchdowns as a sophomore, except for I did get hit. There was a guy named Wayne Johnson that played defensive end. He's now a Seattle police officer. He was a senior when I was a sophomore, and I do remember a lick he put on me during that game. But the Roosevelt's been kind of kind to me over the years.
You have a big smile on your face. You like to speak about my alma mater, Roosevelt, Greg. Like I like to talk about Washington State. You love to take shots at Washington State too. So, yeah. But it's all good. Paul Schneiderman, host of the Sports Untold podcast. We're live today on Facebook on the 100th edition with the great Greg Lewis. Hey, Greg, let me get a couple more. You got a few more minutes?
Yeah.
Oh,
sure.
Good. One coach who kind of interests me in the Pac-12 is Jonathan Smith, former offensive coordinator at Washington. He was a walk-on at Oregon State. He's back coaching at his alma mater. He seems like a pretty quality guy. I mean, if Jonathan Smith and Oregon State have a big year, could you see him maybe getting some offers from some bigger name schools? Or I mean, I'm just curious. Would he leave Oregon State? I mean, I want to ask you a question about Jonathan Smith and his future.
I think it's more likely that he'll get offers than that he would actually leave. I think he's in a really good scenario and place for him. I think the passion he has for Oregon State. I think the leeway he'll be given from the fans there because of his history that's connected to that university. The thing about college football coaches is you're either have been fired or you're going to be fired at some point. It just is a nature of the profession for the most part. I mean, certainly there's some longtime folks who hung around for a long time, but now it's becoming more of a, you win. I think I read the other day that the gentleman, the head coach at LSU, that he's on the hot seat. This guy won the national championship like 3 years ago, and now he's on the hot seat. What have you done
for me lately, right?
Yeah. So I think Jonathan Smith has a good in a good place with folks who love him, who has history connected to that organization and that university that will probably give him a softer landing and less harsh expectations. So I think it's a good place for him, and I think he's doing a good job. But he's been given the time. I mean, you think about it. This is the fourth year. They hadn't won more than maybe 3 or 4 games in his previous 3 years. So I think it goes to show you that you got to give a coach some time.
You brought up a point about Smith. He probably has a little more leeway at Oregon State than we have in another school. But I'm just kind of intrigued with him when he's doing Oregon State. And putting on an alternative history hat, we have to wonder that if he had stayed at Washington, maybe it would have been Coach Jonathan Smith right now, not Coach Jimmy Lake. You just wonder if he hadn't left when he did, what could have happened with us, whether he could have been the Washington coach. Anyhow, that's just an alternative history hypothetical.
Yeah, I remember when he was here, people were complaining about the offense.
I know.
And he wasn't, the right guy. And if it wasn't for Tedford coming in and, helping us out, it's funny how perspectives change when people change.
Very true. Well, there are people calling for Mike Holmgren's ouster when he was at the Seahawks. People are calling for Lou Piniella to be fired. People are calling for Lenny Wilkins to be fired. Some of these most prominent, great coaches. I don't know if Don James ever got much of that, but it seems like most coaches, even Hall of Fame coaches, had people calling for their firings at one point.
Yeah, I think early in Don's career, before he had the breakthrough, they were actually 0-2.
That's true. That is true.
He won the Rose Bowl. And then after my sophomore year, my freshman year, we went 6-4-1.
Mm-hmm.
Then my sophomore year, we went 6-5 and did not go to a bowl game and lost the Apple Cup. And people were whispering that Don James may have lost it and he may have, lost a step. And that's when he made the decision to change up the offense, went and hired Keith Gilbertson and, a couple of years later, national champions. So.
Thank you for correcting my recollection of the history. You're correct. When Don James started in the mid-'70s, there were questions if he was going to last as the Husky coach. So thank you for correcting that. All right, Greg, I'm going to get probably 2 more questions in with you, and maybe you'll come back for a 5th time if I can behave myself.
I'm always around.
Okay, all right. Well, I enjoyed seeing you, Greg. It's always fun to see off the video and the radio as well. I haven't seen you like many others during the pandemic in person, but hopefully I'll see you socially soon too. All right, Greg, I asked Granville Emerson, our friend, this question recently, and I have a book on sports cinema by a guy named Randy Williams. It came out back in about 2006. It's a little dated, but it's a fun book. He ranks the top 100 sports movies, and here are his top 5. His top 5 are The Hustler with Paul Newman. Number 2 is Bull Durham. Number 3 is This Sporting Life, an old Richard Harris movie that came out in 1963, a rugby movie. Number 4 is Chariots of Fire. Number 5 is Raging Bull. What do you think of that list, and what is your favorite sports movie if you had to pick one?
Well, I've seen most of the movies you mentioned there, and I like most of them. They were, some of them are classics. And I'm at that age now where I'm considered a classic. So
I am too.
I like them
too.
There are a lot of good sports movies out there. Some are, less, I mean, they're a little, stretch to call them sports movies.
True.
But pure sports movies, probably one of my favorites of all time is Brian's Song. The Brian Piccolo story that came out, man, probably in the maybe early 70s. That's one of my favorite sports movies of all time is Brian's Song.
Great one, but Gale Sayers and the whole story there. All right, here's a few others that I liked. I liked Rocky, Hoop Dreams, The Natural. I thought Any Given Sunday with Al Pacino was interesting. Hoosiers, 8 Men Out, and I'm going to throw in Caddyshack. Those were some sports movies I liked. So
I'm a big Rocky fan, and I can tell you the new sort of trilogy that they brought out about Apollo Creed's son. First I was like, this is going to be hokey. I don't know how they're going to make this. But those are actually some really good movies. Creed 1 and 2 were really, really good movies. So they stand the test of time. I think they will, along with the Rocky series. So.
I saw those recent Apollo Creed ones, and I with you on the Rocky movies. I think Carl Weathers is a great actor.
Yeah,
Stallone's great, but I think Carl Weathers is I follow him on Twitter. He's a fun guy to follow on Twitter. So he played the NFL. He's one of your former NFL colleagues. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'd love to get him on my show one day, but maybe that's wishful thinking. All right, Greg, I think I'm going to get one more question here. We have talked about this before. I think it may have been last year I had you on. And by the way, I had you last year on right after the first Biden-Trump debate. You referred to them, both those guys, as like the two old judges in the Muppet Show. So I don't know. You can comment on that more if you want. But anyhow, I remember when I talked to you, I think last year, you were skeptical of the idea of paying college athletes. And there was a new Supreme Court case that came down a few months ago, unanimous decision, Alston versus NCAA. And the court ruled, and I'll break this down the most simple way possible, that restrictions on educational-related compensation by the NCAA violate federal antitrust laws. Kavanaugh wrote a concurring opinion that he believes all restrictions on paying college athletes could violate antitrust law. What do you think of that decision, that Alston versus NCAA decision?
Well, I mean, I understand it from a legal perspective, why that makes sense. I think college sports has for a long time been sort of a, variant from the rule, or variant from what, is normal. And there's reasons why, because of the widespread, what you would consider unlevel playing field that's created when the haves have the ability to invest in college sports where the have-nots or those, frankly, who don't think it's as important. And so you have unequal playing fields. And that's really what it's evolving to. And I think it's going to continue evolve into with all of the ways that players are being able to be played now. I think what could have happened that could have saved us from some of this, where I think it's ultimately going to go, is if there's a lot of smart people involved in college athletics. I mean, and, we're talking about college presidents, the like. They should have been able to come up with a system where they could have kept players from being in the the throes that they were in. A lot of players, are in some dire financial situations when they're in college. I mean, they just are. And I think because they were looking for a way to figure out how to get out, and they decided to go the legal way. And once you open up Pandora's box, like you just said, the court said, hey, this doesn't make any sense. That's antitrust. If they would have come up with a system previous to the athletes having to go the suing route, they probably could have came up with something that would have made players, sort of even across the board, having, their basic needs met, and maybe a little something on top of that might have been, at least, acceptable. But since they didn't, and they just let it go this far, now, like you just said, everything ultimately is going to be on the table, and it's going to create not only a caste system amongst universities and schools and leagues and all that, but amongst players. I know at the UW, I would have felt like, well, I had a 2,000-yard season, or I had a 175-yard game this week. I should get a little more than the backup running back who didn't even play. So, those.
And then we have these complex title line issues. I mean, should rowers be paid as much as basketball players and football players? It gets very complicated. But I'm going to put you on the spot, Greg, for a second.
Yeah.
So Obama had that famous line where he said his position on gay marriage has evolved. Has Greg Lewis's position on paying college athletes evolved at all?
I think it's evolved to some degree. I just think we should have, come up with a system before we got to what's going to currently happen. I think now, schools where their alums care more about football than they do life itself are going to, pump a lot of money and a lot of, that gray area opportunities. And then schools who have the connections to alums who, like a Phil Knight and stuff like that, they're going to benefit from it. Where a school like San Diego State, I don't know who their alums are. I'm just picking a school out of a hat. Even the University of Washington, to some degree, we have obviously some very rich alums, but I don't know how vested they are in college athletics to that level. So I think it's just going to further, create this whole, football up here is okay. Football in the Midwest is all right. Down south, football is real important, and they're going to continue to dominate national championships. And then there's the area you bring basketball into it, the ACC footprint, so there's going to be some, I think widening of the margins of where competitive nature is.
Putting on my legal hat for a second, I thought Kavanaugh's concurring opinion was very fascinating, where he said he was ready to throw out all restrictions on paying college athletes. But I think the fact our divisive Supreme Court had a unanimous decision telling the NCAA, no, you cannot restrict those educational benefits. That was interesting in this very ideological age.
Yeah, it didn't make sense. And I think, college athletic had gotten used to having a free labor force and making billions of dollars and making the people in power, So, one of the things I remember talking about was, college athletics is driven by football and basketball players. And most of them come from, lower income and, real diverse communities. And they're supplementing a whole bunch of rich folks. And they're even paying the tuition of those other sports that you talk about, the rowers and the tennis players and all of that. They're paying their tuition as well. So I think from that perspective, I do look at it as, the folks who are most responsible for making the money are the ones who probably benefit the less and probably have the most need. So
a lot there. We could talk about this subject for hours. Well, Greg, thank you so much for joining me again on the 100th edition of Sports Untold, and always fun to catch up with you. And you and Steve Kelly are the two guests who've been on my show the most number of times. You each have come on 4 times. So hopefully I'll behave myself and get a 5th interview with Greg Lewis at some point. So
all right. Talk to you soon, Paul.
Thanks, Greg. I'll see you soon. Enjoyed it.
Your viewers.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to say bye to my viewers, too. Thanks, everybody, for watching, listening. I've got some great questions today from the audience as well.